Welcome, witches, wizards, and muggles alike, to another enchanting episode of Magical Tales from the Slytherin Common Room, bringing your favorite Harry Potter fanfiction to audio format. So sit back, relax, and Accio headphones, and let the magic begin.
Apostasy by Deydralinne, Chapter 33, A Kiddie Pool of Crimson. Tom, though initially overcome with glee, quickly became confused upon learning they hadn't just brought Harry to him for him to watch the execution. I am afraid I do not follow. What would you like me to do with him? I can't kill him. Sure you can. The prophecy thing is done, Ginny started explaining, but Tom held up his hand and shook his head. I don't mean physically. I mean, being the minister and following Hermione's directions. I can't kill him. I could take him before the Wizengamot, but he would need to get jail time. Or it would look like No, Ginny dismissed with a shake of her head. Hermione couldn't stop the laugh bubbling up out of her as she looked at Harry's round, confused eyes as he glanced between his mortal enemy and the girl he had raped, neither of them finding him important enough to kill. Hermione was impressed by Tom's commitment to her orders. However, it was a good indication that he was, in fact, taking on board what she had said. Oh man, nobody wants you, she giggled. Does this mean that we can just kill him then? Because I think Blaise halted the end of her sentence with the sectum sempra that he cast at Harry, who remained stationary and upright. His skin erupted into dozens of small cuts, and a muffled and long groan of pain escaped the wizard. Blaise, who Hermione was certain had a thing about mess, waved his wand again, and any blood that had begun to drip fell instead into a large tub-like object that had materialized beneath Harry. Is that a kiddie pool? Ginny asked in surprise. Tom moved to stand next to Hermione, unbothered by the happenings in his foyer. Draco innocently stepped back to stand beside her, slipping his hand into hers and rubbing the back of her hand affectionately, while pretending to be focused on the scene unfolding with Harry. Hermione rolled her eyes and chuckled. Tom didn't seem to notice, however, and cast her one of his charming smiles. Hermione, I wanted to offer my personal congratulations on securing the French ministry. With everything that has happened as of late, I haven't had a chance to discuss much with you. Why don't you and your household join me for dinner this week? We can have a debrief and a celebratory drink in honor of your success. His tone was all suave, but his eyes told her that the invitation was more mandatory than an offer. Of course, she smiled back at him. That would be lovely. Tom's eyes fell to hers, and Draco's joined hands. Draco shifted beside her, tension arising as Tom and Draco began to stare at each other for an uncomfortable length of time. Harry's muffled moans of pain being the backtrack for whatever moment this was almost seemed fitting. Was the notion that one of the top commanders had fallen into bed with a muggle? Or was Draco's subtle little claims over her warranted to something more? Wouldn't it? She added belatedly, intentionally turning to Draco and squeezing his hand in warning when the tension became too thick. Draco smiled lightly. Yes, you honor us, my lord. Minister, please, Draco. If you insist on such formalities, after all. Tom's eyes flicked back to her in assessment, as if she was an old familiar painting of which he was quite fond. Hermione here is leading us in a new direction, is she not? Hermione put on her best smile and nodded. That is correct. How are things going at the ministry? She asked, purposely shifting the conversation away from herself, while Ginny hit Harry with a Cruciatus curse. Tom chuckled politely. St. Mungo's was rather surprised to learn that funding had been reinstated. It's fine. Different, but fine. She could sense the words he wasn't saying. That it had been a difficult adjustment period for him. Tom was still unlearning some of his more barbaric ways. Honestly, he was doing so much better than she expected of him, and it was possible that having the face he did had impacted his confidence more than he had let on. Hermione nodded. Unfortunately, the ministry was still in shambles, and trying to find legitimate workers was hard. The public seemed to be slowly coming around to the idea, more out of desperation to end the war possibly, but also in large part due to the Order's stupid decision to attack Diagon Alley. I think it's important that we get Hogwarts back up and running as soon as possible, but I think that more importantly, and not at the same extent, we need to get Diagon operational again. It would be a good opportunity for a PR stunt to see you out there, helping the community and all that bullshit. Feed them the idea that you give a crap. Harry screamed silently, pulling her attention momentarily to see that Blaise had stabbed a knife into Harry's genitals before turning back to the conversation between her and Tom. Ginny, still holding the Cruciatus steady, especially if we are going to expect students to shop there, parents of half-bloods and muggle-borns might feel better about it if we at least look like we're coming out the other side of the war. Tom nodded. In that case, Draco, which team do you think would be most appropriate for the task? Tom's tone was stiff. There had definitely been some shift in dynamic between the two men, and it made her skin itch. Pusey's team would probably be the most pliable to the new regime minister. Draco's tone was equally clipped, and Hermione started to panic internally. Her eyes sought out Ginny, who was now just watching on as Blaise stabbed Harry in the stomach repeatedly, but turned as she felt Hermione's eyes on her. Hermione sent her a look that she hoped read, "Help me," and tried to indicate toward Draco and Tom without making any movement. Mercifully, Ginny picked up on her cues and came to pull Tom away under the guise of relaxing the supervision agreement now that she and Blaise were married. Hermione rounded on Draco and looked at him expectantly. He only shrugged until Hermione yanked her hand from his. If he wasn't going to tell her, then she would play the same game. Draco sighed while Harry screamed silently. "He was just warning me." "Warning you of what?" Hermione raised one eyebrow. "Not to hurt you. He is under the impression that I am only seeking your casual affections." Draco shifted awkwardly. That didn't make any sense to Hermione. "And he's what? Worried that I will run back to the Order if it doesn't work out?" Draco frowned in surprise at her. "No. He's taken it upon himself to step into somewhat of a surrogate father role. He is more concerned about your mental and emotional well-being in the event that would happen. He has become attached, as much as it is possible for Tom Riddle to become attached, that is. He feels that since you corrected his appearance and your plan is entirely on track for success, well, you have become his new favorite being." "Then what was with your iciness?" Hermione scowled. She didn't appreciate the obviously private conversation they had in her presence, no less. "I am of the opinion that you are not an object to be treasured. You are not one of the Death Eaters, so while I appreciate his respectful behavior, his protectiveness is not warranted, nor is it unmatched by my own." Draco clenched his jaw and looked over her head towards his boss. Hermione smirked up at him. "Is that so? Are you saying I shouldn't be treasured? Am I not worthy of being coveted, Malfoy?" Draco clicked his tongue at her and fought the shake of his head. "I have fucked you, Hermione. I made you come as little as an hour ago. You do not call me Malfoy again." "Or what?" she teased. "Are you going to bend me over your knee and belt my ass, Malfoy?" Draco growled and lunged at her. Hermione squealed and tried to dodge out of the way, a huge grin spreading across her face as she squirmed in his hold, trying to lean away from his playful attempt to bite her face. "What's my name?" he warned, his eyes alight with happiness. Hermione giggled and tried to break free, ducking her head under his and wriggling to the other side. "Malfoy!" she squeaked, peals of laughter filtering through as he lifted her off the ground so she couldn't get away. Those damn butterflies had grown and transfigured into birds that were desperately trying to take flight. She squeezed her head to one shoulder as he came close to biting at that side of her neck. Her cheeks hurt with the extent of the grinning, Draco's mouth mirroring her own, beaming just as widely, just as genuinely. "What was that?" His fingers started to tickle at her ribs. The shrieks coming from her drowned out the gushing, wet sounds of Blaise stabbing into Harry or the pants of exertion caused by the effort, at least for her anyways. What was that?" His whole face lit up when he smiled at her like that. His arms were wrapped around her back, holding her so tightly to him that she had nowhere to go and no way to escape the tickling. "Draco!" she finally yelped, between gasps for breath that her laughter had stolen. Draco, I give. She giggled. Draco held her just as close as he placed her back on her feet, and the sounds of blood dripping returned. Harry had fallen quiet, likely dead, but Blaise obviously still had some pent-up aggression towards the wizard. Draco leaned down and kissed her deeply, melting the ice within her once again. Ugh. Ginny pulled a face of disgust as she slid back over to them. You two are actually sickening. Blaise had finally stopped stabbing Harry Potter, who was, in fact, very much dead. It would be hard for him to remain alive with the number of wounds covering his body and the amount of blood being vanished underneath him, though it seemed just as much had found its way onto Blaise, mingling with his sweat and seeping into his clothes. Ginny's husband stood, panting, trying to catch his breath as he listened to a Death Eater Hermione hadn't noticed arrive. Tom, listening carefully to whatever the soldier was saying. The logical part of her knew that not every report would mean another battle or another raid, but she was just so damn tired, and the amount of shit they had been through lately put her on edge. Blaise nodded along seriously, occasionally saying something to Tom, likely in explanation. Draco must have felt her tension and followed her gaze to their friend. Raoul. He was in Italy last I heard. It might be about your other minister's boyfriend, he whispered reassuringly in her ear. Hermione turned to him in surprise. You knew about that? Hermione gaped, shoving him lightly in the chest. Draco quirked an eyebrow at her. My family has been in contact with the French ministry for years. It wasn't hard to work out. Hermione scoffed in disbelief. Then what was with all the grrr, caveman rage, me jealous, bullshit? Draco shrugged and smirked smugly at her. Foreplay? Hermione laughed and shoved him away with a shake of her head. Unbelievable. Blaise and Tom made their way over while Raoul levitated Harry's body from the room. So, it turns out Minister Renaud was correct to assume that Italy's government was involved. Raoul tracked him to a small... Raoul couldn't get a great look, but he said about 20, and they looked like an elite team. Hermione nodded. All right, let's make sure Renaud knows. He's probably going out of his mind by now. I'll fill him in, Ginny declared. I won't go into detail, but I will fill him in on Louis' situation. Hermione nodded. Tom, is it okay if I assemble a team to go in and retrieve him? It would be highly beneficial for the relationship between England and France, but not good for the relationship between England and Italy, he queried. Blaise hummed. With all due respect, sir, I think that may already be the case of flogging a dead horse. It's highly probable we will have to infiltrate their government as it is. Tom paced for a moment, deep in thought. Hermione watched him silently, letting him think it over in his head. All right, who can we plant in there to start that process? Draco tipped his head in consideration. Vivaldo, perhaps? Tom nodded again in agreement. Fine, make that happen then. Hermione, you may gather a team of your choice. Keep me informed. Tom nodded, dismissing them for now. Hermione offered him a bow of her head respectfully. Though he wasn't her boss, the idea that she had him in close support did wonders for her confidence. Thank you, Tom, she responded quietly. The second they landed back at the chateau, she turned to Draco seriously. I want Tiberius on that mission, and I do not want him leaving Italy alive. Draco chuckled. Great minds, love. Consider it done. His face was simply beautiful in the glowing orange of the fading daylight. Both Blaise and Ginny nodded their approval of that decision. Hermione found Daphne, Pansy, Astoria, and Theo all dancing about the sitting room, the wireless playing in the background, and all with a drink in hand. Ah, they have returned, Theo chirped with far too much enthusiasm and pep. Hermione's eyes scanned the room and landed on the tops of the silver cans, only just visible over the bar top. Oh dear, Hermione mumbled, her eyes locked with Ginny, who peered back at her in glee and shrugged. Hermione chuckled and made her way to the bar. There laid enough empty cans for each of the housemates that had remained home to have drunk 2 or 3 each. Astoria pulled Ginny in to dance with them. The petite blonde had clearly consumed a fair amount of energy drinks by the way she was bouncing around. her hair flying everywhere, tugging one of Ginny's arms toward her while pushing the other away, only to switch with the next bounce. Danzy yelled and singing along with the song playing on the radio. "Are you lot drunk?" Draco frowned at them in horror. Hermione held up one of the empty cans to him in explanation. Draco threw his head back and sighed loudly. Hermione giggled in amusement. Based on the level of drinks consumed, they were in for a long night. She started singing along and mixing them all drinks. Really, at this stage, she may as well join them, right?